Hello, and welcome to the FieldView 21 webinar. My name is Yves-Marie Lefebvre, and I'm the FieldView Business Director. With me today is my colleague Shane Wagner. Shane, you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone. I'll be here helping with the questions and answers. So if you do have any questions, please put them in the questions box on the interface, and I will be asking them on your behalf. So enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Shane. And today we are going to talk about FieldView 21, our latest production version. It's available now on our portal. And we are going to give you a high-level presentation of the new features and improvements. If you want the full details, you'll find more material on our website and also in the Welcome to documentation that comes with the FieldView package. So our outline for today will cover first a new, totally unique capability called the Auto Partitioner. We'll talk about the change to our license manager and then go over some additional improvements and smaller features. So let's start right away with the Auto Partitioner. And first, explain why that was needed. So the challenge is that, well, FieldView has been capable of doing MPI parallel for a very long time, and that gives you speed ups and access to more memory if you have a distributed memory cluster. But the requirement is that you have a well-balanced multi-grid dataset. FieldView relies on your blocks for doing MPI parallel. But the problem is that it's not always the case. It's not the data you get from structured solvers is not always well-balanced. You can have multiple reasons for that, but typically it's either single grid or the grids are coming from the topology, from the meshing process, and not from how the solver partitioned it. So what we're doing with the Auto Partitioner is that we're extending the benefits of MPI parallel to users of structured data with single grid data or poorly balanced multi-grid datasets. Now, this is a very unique capability. To our knowledge, no other post-processor has anything equivalent to repartition data like that on the fly. For that reason, we're going to introduce it with our premium license for FieldView Parallel 32 or above. We have also options for running on more parallel servers. The initial support with FieldView 21 is for the plot 3D and overflow formats. And that really covers a lot of structured solvers. So the vast majority of our users running structured solvers will be covered with these two formats. All right, so let's take a step back and explain again why this is a challenge and why FieldView is relying on your blocks. To explain that, I'm going to introduce a bit of convention, some notations first. So here is a cut-through dataset that shows numbered grids by color. Those grids have different sizes, and by that, I mean the total number of cells or nodes in your grids. FieldView uses that to read the case in parallel using MPI, and the grids get sent to various FieldView parallel server processes. And the MPI process load is a direct function of the number of nodes in each one of the grid blocks. So here we're looking at an ideal case. You have 8 grids. I'm running on 8 processes, so you have a perfect match. But this is just to define the convention. And going forward, we're going to focus just on these 2 plots to understand where the problem can be and why the Auto Partitioner is a solution. So if you look at the parallel speedup you're going to obtain, really the time it takes to do any operation is the time it's going to take for the longest process, right? The one that is the most loaded, so the one with the largest number of cells. So that defines for you the longest process. And here we have good scaling, we have good load balancing, just coming from the type of data that you have. All right, let's look at the second case now. If we double the number of grids and still load it on 8 parallel processes, what FieldView does is that it overloads the processes, and each one is going to take 2 grids And that's how naturally you get a good load balancing. You can see again that the longest process is about the same duration as the shortest process, so you have good load balancing. But we're still looking at an ideal case here, 16 grids that are well balanced. What happens if you have blocks that are larger than the rest? And again, that comes easily for through the meshing process for topological reasons. Some of your grids can be much larger than the rest. So if you read that in parallel in FieldView 20 or earlier, the overload is going to give more blocks to some of the processes, but that's not going to balance off the fact that some of your grids are much larger. And so the big blocks dominate and define the kind of speed up you can expect from your parallel process. And here you can see that we have poor load balancing. So that's what has been happening for many years, and it has been preventing some of our customers to really benefit from parallel because of their really the way their data set are defined and their mesh topology. So we are solving this problem now with a new Auto Partitioner. What the Auto Partitioner will do is split the largest grid on the fly at read time, and it will do that automatically and come up with a new partitioning for your grids. So here we define new blocks, automatically computed by FieldView. You don't have to worry about it. It automatically adjusts to the number of grids, the number of nodes in your grids, and the number of processes that you're running for FieldView parallel. And here you can see that by creating those two extra grids, we are now getting a very good balance, and so we can expect good parallel speed ups. So far we've been running with 8 parallel processes. What it gives you with the Auto Partitioner is also the ability to go to more parallel processes for the same case. So if we look at the same case with 2 grids having the majority of the nodes, if you want to load that on 16 cores, the Auto Partitioner is just going to adjust and compute a new optimal partition, creating more subgrids for the large grids. And you can see here that then doing overload on your parallel processes, you get the good load balancing. All right, so that's quite easy in principle. Again, all you have to remember is that FieldView takes care of it for you. It repartitions the data on the fly at read time, introducing very little overhead, and it gives you the benefits of parallel. Let's look at it on some real life cases now. The first one is going to be very simple. A single grid case, 200 million nodes. So in the past, because it was single grid, your only option for reading this was to use serial. And here you can see the time that it was taking to read the case and create a nicer surface for this data set. Now with the Auto Partitioner, you can finally use parallel on it. And here we're comparing with the time it takes for 32 cores. So you can see that we get a nice speed up of 2.5 times faster. So again, you get the parallel speed up, and you get also access to more memory on the cluster. If I had a larger case, I could get the case split on the various nodes of my cluster, and then getting access to more memory for the FieldView processes overall. All right, now some of you might be thinking, hold on, we are running on 32 cores here, the speed up is 2.5. Why isn't that bigger? Well, what's going to pretty quickly limit the speed up you can get is your environment, your hardware, right? Here, we're still loading a single file with multiple processes. And if we look at the time it took for 32 cores over here, we have a bandwidth that is about ½ a gig per second, which is already quite fast, right? So there's going to be a point where your hardware, your parallel file system, your network are going to reach their limit in how quickly they can read that file. And so you cannot expect to get speedups on hundreds or thousands of processes, but you still do get a nice speedup on 32 or 64 cores, and that's what the Auto Partitioner gives you. Moving on to a second real-life case. Now we are looking at a case where we have 17 blocks. So you can see from the chart over here that just 5 of them have the majority of the nodes. And again, this is just coming from the mesh topology. This is a Plot3D case, about 400 million nodes, to give you an idea of the size of it, looking at the timing. So in the past, FieldView 20 was already doing a good job running on 8 cores compared to serial. And that's because between the 5 large blocks and the rest of the 12 small ones, there was a good overload. But adding cores to it, you could not get additional speedups just because the largest 5 blocks were the limiting factors. And actually going up to 32 cores, it was even getting a bit slower because again, the largest grids were dominating, and there was a bit of overhead, right? If you had more processes attacking the same file, it's going to be a bit slower. So without the benefit, you could see the slowdown. Now with the Auto Partitioner, the 5 largest blocks get attacked by the Auto Partitioner, and you get more blocks. And so that gives us some speedups again on top of it, that you can see over here with the Auto Partitioner and 32 cores. So again, that opens the ability to get speedups beyond 8 cores for this case, or get more memory by breaking it down and running it on a cluster. So you'll have to try for yourself, depending on your environment and your data set, to get some speedup numbers. But those 2 cases give you an idea of what you can expect. Again, we are 2.5 times for the single block, 2.6x faster for 32 cores over here with 17 blocks. But that gives you an idea of the kind of speedups you can get. And let's say that if I want to generate a transient video of this case, I will have to read the time step and compute the ISO for each. So generating the animation will take 2.5 times less time overall. Now let's move on to how you actually turn it on and use it in FieldView, this new capability. All right, so first a reminder, so this is only open to or premium licenses that allow you to run parallel 32 jobs or above. So you will need that type of a license to see the capability be enabled. If you don't have such a license but are interested into trying the capability, just contact us, send us an email. We'll be happy to set you up with a short-term password. And once you've done that, you still need to go and read your data in parallel. So as a reminder, you go to File, Data Input, you either pick local license parallel over here, or if you have defined some servers for reading the data remotely, you can go over here and pick one of your parallel servers. Once you've done that, the Auto Partition section of the Plot3D under the Flow Reader panels gets enabled, so you can turn it on. And that setting will be remembered from session to session. We anticipate that if you start using the Auto Partitioner, this is going to become your new standard. Once you have it on, and you read your data, you'll see the impact right away. The number of grids will change between reading it without the Auto Partitioner or with Auto Partitioner on. And also, FieldView will print messages to the console or the terminal window telling you that it's been repartitioning some of your blocks and printing a report about which blocks have been repartitioned. A final word on the Auto Partitioner. It does support ghost cells. So I don't anticipate that a lot of customers will need to use them, but just in case, as they've been implemented. What could be happening is that you might see discontinuities at the new partitions being created that the solver was not aware of. And so if you compute isosurfaces for user-defined formulas that do include spatial derivatives with the derivatives computed in FieldView, because those are new partitions, there could be a discontinuity, and that could lead to showing, for instance, gaps like we see over here in an isosurface. Now, I don't want to overestimate the need for this, right? The gaps won't be larger than a cell or two, so that had to show that on a pretty coarse mesh, but on a fine mesh, you may not need to activate the ghost cells. If you need to, you find the ghost cells right below the Auto Partitioner input, and you can define 1 or 2 layers of ghost cells, and you can see that it's sufficient for closing the gap over here. However, because new faces will be added to your surfaces, this will have an impact on quantitative analysis, like integrating scalars or vectors on that surface. So for that reason, we are making ghost cells incompatible with integration, as it is said in the panel over here, and integration will be disabled if you turn on the ghost cells, but you just have to turn them off if you are more interested into quantitative analysis. All right, with that covers it for the new Auto Partitioner. Let me turn to Shane. Do we have questions yet? Anything on this section?
Well, there is one question, which is how do we license the Auto Partitioner? Does a person need to get a separate password or key?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So to be totally clear, it is controlled by the same password that controls the number of cores that you can run. And so if your license allows 32 cores or more, then the capability will be enabled. Okay,
good. So as a reminder to everybody, you can use the questions feature in the interface to text in some questions if you have them. Text them in anytime, and we'll break again later or at the end and answer those questions. So that's it for now.
All right, thanks, Shane. Let's move on. Next, we're going to talk about the changes we are making to our license management. And yeah, before I do that, I want to remind you that FieldView 21 is available now. It's been released Wednesday last week. So you can download it from our portal, and I want to cover that because there's been a few changes to our portal. So if you go to our website, the best way to access our portal is to click here, Customer Portal, and you may have noticed a small change over here. So it's now pointing you to mytechplot.com. That's not a mistake. As you can see over here, you'll get there, you'll have the 2 logos, TechPlot and FieldView. Now, you may recall that for the last 2 years, TechPlot and FieldView have been under the same ownership. And what we are doing here is moving all of our customers under a single portal to really provide them with the best infrastructure and the best service. For everyone who had an account on the FieldView portal, your accounts have been ported over. So you will not need to create a new account. The only thing we could not port over was your password, because your password is personal. So the first time you get to the portal, you will need to hit reset your password, as we give instructions over here. So it's very easy. You will define a new password. When it's done, you can use your account to log in. And if you already had a TechPlot account, you can just use that, and they will give you access to FieldView as well. Because now, when you go to product releases, all of our products are under a single page. TechPlot 360, TechPlot ARS, TechPlot Focus, and FieldView are provided over here. And with this new unified infrastructure, we have also been able to extend the capabilities provided by the portal to the FieldView customers, you can see that now you get access to your license. This is directly connected to a customer database. So it knows about your license, knows about the term. You can see that here I have a license for 32 cores. And additional things you can do here. If you have a single system license, you can recreate a key from here. Plenty of things you can do from there. You can work, be in touch with our technical support, and so on. All right, so let's go back to this license management change and why we are switching to it, to a new one. We've got to a point where about a third of our customer interactions we support are about licensing. FieldView doesn't start, I don't know how to set up my license server. And really, well, we find that it is a lot, and it is a lot because this is not the type of discussion we would like to have with you. We'd like to talk about how we can help with FieldView, how we can teach you about more features in FieldView, how we can help you post-process your CFD results faster, not how to get FieldView started. In the meantime, our friends from Techpla have been using a different solution called Reprise License Manager, RLM. They've been using it for many years, very happy with it. And one of the main points is that their number of support interactions about licensing is very small in comparison. So that really pushed us to make that change. In addition, it's not just Techpla who's using this solution. A lot of CAE vendors have used this one as well. So chances are that your IT group is already familiar with RLM, so it won't be a significant change for them. It comes with a lot of changes, improvements for FieldView from the ease of use point of view. So if you don't have an IT group and you're administering your license yourself, this is going to be a big change. This is going to be a lot easier for you. We have options to start the server from the browser-based administration tool. You have option to do all of the setup from the FieldView interface itself. So that's very convenient if you have to do it yourself. If you don't have to, if you have a specialized IT group that takes care of licenses, they can do things in an advanced way with environment variables, files, and so on, and they will know how to do that. So there's no obligation for them to do it through the GUI. All right, so picking it up where we left it. So I have this license over here. I got a license file from our passwords team, and I saved it where RLM is installed. So if I did that, doing my licensing setup is going to be very easy. Just go and start RLM over here. So from this Windows Start menu, it opens up in my browser, and just need to go and restart. The license is found. Again, very easy. You just drop it where RLM expected in the installation directory. My FieldView license has been found. I also have a Techpla license on the system. Both of them are being served from the same daemon tech LMD. Now, if I start FieldView 21, the first time you launch it, if you haven't done anything for licensing, it's going to look for a license and not find it if you haven't done any setup. Again, your IT group might be taking care of this for you and you won't have any worries, but if you're doing your own administration, FieldView will tell you, right, looking for a license not found, and so a new panel will open up to let you do the licensing setup. You can use either an evaluation and activation code, or here what we'll do is what the majority of our customers use, that is a network floating license. Just type in the name of my server, hit OK, and the server has been found, the connection is set up, the settings have been saved. So when I reopen FieldView, it will know about this. But if I still want to go and check what is happening, I can open the FieldView licensing panel from the help menu. And I've got all the information over here, the type of license, the license server, and the expiration date. So as I said, very, very easy to set up if you have to do it yourself. With this change, we're also simplifying our procedures quite a lot. Like a lot of vendors, we are going to be transitioning to annual keys for everyone. That makes it much easier to handle license transfers if you want to move your licenses to a new server. We will allow users to run all new versions released during their maintenance period. So that means that the next version we release, FieldView, say 22, there will be no need for new keys to be able to run it, right? It will all be based on your maintenance period. And we also have a simplified procedure for virtual servers. There will be no more need for specific software and specific agreements. There's full support included with default executables from RLM. And finally, this is also introducing roaming, which has been a long-term request by some customers. Roaming is the ability to take a license with you. For instance, if you're traveling, you connect your laptop to the license server, you start FieldView with the right environment variables, and FieldView will grab a seat for a number of days. The seat will be sitting on your system. You will no longer need to be connected to the server. And at the end of the process, the token is being returned back to the license manager. In the future version, the next version will also provide support for doing this through the GUI, but at least for now, you have the option to do it through environment variables. And again, some customers have been requesting this for a long time. All right, any question on the license manager, Shane?
No, there are some more questions about partitioning, auto partitioning, so we can go back to those at the end.
Okay.
And again, to all you participants, feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we'll answer them in the Q&A.
All right, moving on then. Oh, yeah, I forgot one more information on the license manager. Because of that switch, right, we had to make a cut. That means that previous versions are not compatible with the new license manager. Only FieldView 21 is. So as you get your new keys, we will be asking you to make the jump and move on to FieldView 21 and delete your old passwords. But you should have no problem doing that, right? FieldView 21 is 100% backward compatible. If you have created restart scripts, FVX or Python scripts for previous versions of FieldView, we've worked hard on making sure that they all work in FieldView 21 and will give you the same images all the time. So there is no reason why you will need to stick to an older version. If you want to give your users more time to transition, we can discuss some exceptions. We are totally open to that, but we are strongly encouraging everyone to move on to FieldView 21. And in addition, as I mentioned, the LLM license manager will also handle your TechPlot 360 and TechPlot ARS licenses if you have any. So that's very easy, very convenient for administering your licenses. All right, now really moving on to the next capability I want to cover. We are adding support for duplication for periodic simulations with translation. This new capability introduced a pretty significant change to the dataset controls panel you can see over here, which is now organized in some form of some tabs and with all the settings you need for defining your periodic boundary conditions. So here we're working on a case which has periodicity. For now, we're only looking at the dataset once. We are going to open the dataset controls panel. You can see the new section down here. By default, there's no duplication. Mirror and rotate have been moved to over here, and the new setting is translate. By default, we try to guess the duplication that you want, making up some default XYZ deltas based on the size of your dataset, but you can overwrite all of them. And you can also adjust the number of copies. All of that are controlled individually per direction and can be controlled as well through restarts and FVX. if you had some streamlines and you recalculate them after you've introduced periodicity, the streamlines are going to go across the periodic boundary conditions. And the same is true for surface flows. If you simplify the view over here, just click the walls and recalculate our surface flows, they are again going to be going across the periodic boundary conditions. So that's very nice for having a more global view of a periodic simulation. That type of periodicity applies very well to doing heat transfers to a pack of batteries, for instance, which is a very common CFD application these days. All right, and finally, last group of improvements we've made are related to a lot of work you're not going to see that we've done in the background on our infrastructure. We've been investing a lot in our development infrastructure, converting to a full CI/CD workflow with Git repo, nightly builds, and so on. So you're not going to see that as new capabilities right away, right? But what it gives you really is that we have a faster and a more reliable development process. So that will give us the ability to release new versions with more developments and more reliable developments with a better continuous integration, continuous development workflow. Some of the first benefits you are actually going to see in FieldView 21 are that our Windows and macOS packages have changed. And one of the signs is that they are digitally signed now. So you will no longer see warnings or messages as you download, install, and run FieldView. More specifically on macOS, this is the biggest change. FieldView is now an official app. It is signed by FieldView CFD and then notarized by Apple. And the installation is really simplified. All you have to do is from this panel to pick the icon and drop it into the applications folder for FieldView to install. At our time of development, we were developing and testing on Big Sur, which was the production version, that now we'll be moving on to the current version, Monterey. So if you encounter any problem with Monterey, we'll be working on it very soon, but we don't anticipate issues. And yeah, I should mention that FieldView is supported on Intel macOS, and working on the M1 is on our roadmap. All right, so that covers really the bulk of what we wanted to cover today. Again, for more details on FieldView 21, you can go to our website, the What's New section, or look for the Welcome to document in your FieldView installation that has all the details about bug fixes and other improvements that we've made into FieldView. It's available now on the new portal, and remember, don't be surprised, we have a unified portal now between FieldView and TechPlot. All right, thank you for your attention, and now we'll get back to Shane for answering some of your questions.
Okay, good. Thank you, Marie. So the first question is actually both a question and an answer, but I will read it out anyway because, Marie, you may have some additional information to share about that. So the question is, when you auto partition, do you preserve gradients across the new partitions? And then sort of the answer is, never mind, it looks like you have Ghost cell support. So is there something more to add to that?
Yes, what I can add is that, so if the gradients were exported from the solver, right, you're not going to need the Ghost cells because you still have continuity. Just to clarify that the Ghost cells are needed if you do the gradient computation inside of FieldView. So that's when you'll want to use the Ghost cells. The Ghost cells have introduced very little overhead in terms of read time and memory. But they do have the drawback of adding faces to your surfaces. So that's why we'll really encourage people to only use them if they see gaps being introduced or discontinuities being introduced in their gradient functions computed in FieldView, which may not be always the case. Like if you have a very complex turbulence isosurface, chances are you're not going to see the difference.
Okay, good. So for the next question, it's how are FEBND files supported in the new auto partitioning?
Oh, that's a great question. So they are fully supported. Yeah, I didn't go to that level of detail. So to clarify for everyone, FEBND files are a way to define your boundaries for the plot3d format. So you specify them so the text file is created either by user or the solver. And it's simply the boundary surfaces are IJK surfaces in it. And so as we read the case, we rework the FEBND file to adjust the surfaces. So there is full support for FEBND files.
Great. And one last question here. Is auto partitioning repeatable? Can you, split the same grid and results again for new total grids or nodes per grid?
So that's a very interesting question too. It is going to be totally repeatable if you read the same case on the same number of processes, right? Now, if you move the data set to another system where you have more cores or more threads and run with more processes, then it's going to be, you're going to create more divisions. So in that case, it will not be repeatable. But if you stick to the same case and same system, yes, it will repeat itself. The auto partitioner setting gets saved in our restarts in very much a FieldView way. That is, we try to keep the restarts fuzzy as much as we can and read them back in a fuzzy mode. So it's going to remember the restart that your case was loaded with the auto partitioner on. So if you use a restart to reload the case on the same system, you will not see the difference. Now, if you do it on a different system, you may end up with a different partition. So we'll try to reapply the restart. That could, however, have some impact on things like computational surfaces then, if you have a different number of grids with different IJK. They will have no impact on coordinate surfaces, streamlines, ISO surfaces, and so on, but that's something to be aware of.
Okay, well, that is all the questions that people had. So thank you, Marie. I guess we can stay on for a couple more minutes. If people do have any more questions, they can text those in. And again, thanks for a great presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting to see these questions coming up about the auto partitioner and people getting pretty deep into the details.
People are thinking about it.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, as we wait, I just want to mention that, yeah, in the final stages of the development process, we had some customers partner with us for doing early testing of this capability. And very similar questions came up, and the feedback has been really good so far. As I mentioned, the benefits you're going to see are going to depend on your data greatly, we were able to understand the speed-ups that people were getting. But really, typically, you will see the largest speed-up if you have some blocks dominating in your data set, where some blocks have the bulk of the data, and it's been confirmed where when running with our beta testers for this version.
We have a few more questions coming in.
Okay.
Any plan for FUNS or OpenFOAM support for the auto partitioner?
Very interesting question as well. Okay, so people who are familiar with the plot3d format or overflow, I'm sure they understand why we started there. The way these formats are organized, it makes it much easier to partition on the fly based on the IJK structure of the file. Doing it for unstructured data will be a lot more challenging, especially if we want to do it on the fly without. So when you do it on the fly, really you want to limit your overhead so that the benefits exceed the overhead that you introduce. So that's something that I do want to look into for FviewNet and OpenFOAM, depending on the pickup we get for this capability now with the Auto Partitioner for structured. It's definitely something we want to look into. The requirement will be that we find an option that is going to be fast enough to make it interesting. One potential solution will be to do it in 2 steps. That is, partition the data separately from the read and maybe save a different file. That's something we are looking into as well. But it depends on whether the user asking the question will be willing to give away a bit of disk space for this extra performance. So that's really a discussion we should have. We have information about who's asking these questions, and if you're interested into that, let us know, right? If you'd like to see parallel support for OpenFOAM or FieldView Instruct going forward, let us know, and we'll be in touch with you to see what kind of solution will be of interest and acceptable to you.
Good. Another question. When you're using unsteady, overflow, and plot3d with changing grids, does the Auto Partitioner work as the grid changes?
Yes, so it's going to look at every time step individually. Okay, so really an unsteady case with changing grid for FieldView, it means that we have to redo the work at each time step of reading the case and reading the results, right? If you have the same grid, we can skip the grid read and go to the results right away, but not if your grid is changing. So what FieldView will do is just process every time step individually and move on to the next time step. So that means that there is no incompatibility and the Auto Partitioner will work.
And another question, does Auto Partition work with overflow background brick grids?
So currently the brick files are ignored by the Auto Partitioner. The reason for that is that these brick files are extremely fast to read, so they don't require being repartitioned. So they are going to be processed separately. So that means that they are compatible with the Auto Partitioner, but the Auto Partitioner doesn't get applied to them because there's no need.
Okay. So this next one is actually not a question, but a comment from a member of our FieldView team. And it's a note that says you can fix the number of cores used by the Auto Partitioner, even when you're reading it on a different system, by using the server config or .srv file. Did you want to comment on that, Emery?
Yeah, that's a good point. And it goes back to the question about repeatability of the auto partitioning. So yeah, my answer was kind of misleading because I said if you move on to another system, you could run on more processes. It's only if you let FieldView free of using the maximum number of processes. So we have this mode that is called, let's see if I can get back to that. Okay, of the various modes for launching parallel, so file, data input, local license parallel is going to run the maximum of what your license allows and your system has. So in that configuration, moving to a different system, let's say that I had 24 cores, I moved to a 32-core system, FieldView will use the 32 cores. But that good comment is telling us, well, if I define a server config file that I call local parallel 24, for instance, I could use that to read using 24 processes on a system with either 24 cores or 32 cores, right? You can easily control that through the server configuration file. In that case, then, going from system to system, the partitioning will be repeatable. So that's an excellent comment from our team. Thank you.
Okay, and one last question here. Will the auto partitioner always change or overwrite the original mesh?
So there's no overwrite. It's done on the fly in FieldView memory. And so the file remains intact. It's untouched.
Good. I think that does it.
All right.
That's all the questions. And
excellent technical questions on the topic.
Yeah.
Looking forward to having more of these discussions with our customers who really seem interested into the capability.
And again, thank you, Yves-Marie, for an excellent presentation. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. And with that, I think we'll say goodbye, yeah?
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Shane, for handling the questions. And looking forward to more feedback on FieldView 21. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.